might just have had the worst tournament in the history of Fortnite. Let's talk about the Trio Cash Cup yesterday, what went wrong, and how the players ended up placing. Now, yesterday's Trio Cash Cup was the rescheduled Trio Cash Cup because of the Fortnite Mess update this Friday. Fortnite Mess was meant to come out, but there were some issues with the patch and the update, so they ended up moving that over towards Saturday, which means that all of the tournaments on Saturday got moved to Sunday. So in one day, we had Cash Cups, we had reload tournaments, we had EU, NA, ranked cups, all of the tournaments ran at the same time, and that caused some issues. Now, yesterday's Trio Cash Cup opens started with no issues. It ran for 3 hours. People qualified. It was completely fine. We'll talk about where people ended up placing it opens due to qualifying a little bit, but that tournament had no issues overall. After the opens, that's when problems started to go crazy. The final started off with not that many problems in the first hour, and then all of a sudden, when the other tournaments around the regions got started, the players were starting to get matchmaking errors. Now, what happens at that point? Well, nothing. We ended up playing the tournament out. The whole 3 hours got played out with not much communication. An hour before the tournament ended, we got a Fortnite status tweet acknowledging the issues and players having matchmaking errors, and they said they were going to add an hour to the tournament in order to combat these issues. Well, that hour didn't end up coming. So we waited and we waited towards the end of the tournament, and they still hadn't added that hour towards the end of the tournament, which probably means that in that moment, I think they were trying to fix the issues and they were going to add an hour if the issues were fixed, but they never ended up being able to fix it. Now, that actually didn't make too much sense to me, considering half the people played tournaments and half the people weren't able to play the tournament, and then half the people also lost a bunch of their games. So adding an hour to the tournament actually wouldn't solve the issue. So even if they ended up fixing the problems, adding an hour would have made things worse. It should have just been rescheduled from the start. But of course, it's on a weekend, so obviously not that many people are working at Epic Games on the weekend. A lot of the common issues that we always have when it comes to tournaments running on the weekend, especially in the off season when, you know, Epic staff might not be available as much, and tournaments don't seem as important, which is a whole nother issue for another video. Now, when the tournament ended up finishing, we still had no communication. The tournament ended up being done, and then Epic made a tweet saying that they were rating out the tournament and rescheduling the tournaments that were already played at the moment. Now, that wasn't a very clear tweet. First of all, what does rating out mean? A lot of people were confused by this tweet because NA Trio started right when EU finals finished. So a lot of people thought, oh, they're just rating out EU. That means they fixed the issues, right? But then NA also didn't start to work. People couldn't queue up. And then a lot of pros thought, okay, well, rating out means they're rating out money. They're making it rain for some of the less English-speaking people. That's not what that means. And people like Reason were very, very confident that they were going to end up being paid out for this tournament. I think Giannis also made a tweet. No, they're not going to get paid out for this tournament unless there were issues with the tournament. So essentially, rating out means that they were just going to cancel the remaining tournaments. And then later on, they made a final tweet saying that they were rescheduling all the tournaments that were being played today that weren't including OCE in Asia. So EU is going to get restarted, the squad tournament, the duo reload tournaments, and all future tournaments of that day. So the NA Trio Cash Cup, reload squad, Brazil, and all the other regions as well, including Middle East as well, we're going to be rescheduled to a different time and day, to an unknown day, of course. So we don't even know when those tournaments are going to be hosted. There's not even that much time to host these tournaments with the new OG season coming out on November 3rd, and we have tournaments 6 days a week now. Doesn't seem like we're probably going to get this tournament, if being honest. Those are the issues that started off with that tournament, but let's talk about the opens, where there were actually no issues, so we can take a look how some people did and how some of the trios are currently doing as well. Now let's talk about the biggest one, of course, Mongo, Savage, Marius. They have moved draw spots. God bless. They have moved to a different draw spot. That's just something that a lot of people were looking at and a lot of people wanted them to do in terms of the overall health of that trio. They did move to a different spot. Now, the first game, they ended up landing the Raft, which is fine because it's the W key game. And when they're playing low elo games, they've decided to keep landing Raft, which is completely okay. But when they get into the higher elo games, we saw them move to a different spot. And that spot is Doomstadt. They ended up landing Doomstadt, for the majority of the high elo games, which they did pretty well from. They played a lot more end games. They didn't really die or spawn that much, and this is obviously the spot that Marius lands at in duos. So that is very, very positive overall. They were very, very close to qualifying. They were, I believe, 4 or 5 points off of qualifying. It all came down to the last game, but if you were watching the tournament, you could see some small issues out of that trio. A few too many games where singular players were dying. I don't think they played many end games as a full trio. There was a few solo Marius clutches, a few Savage clutches, a few Mongo clutches, but we didn't really see a full trio end game. And the games that we did see that, I think they ended up placing top 1 or top 2 overall in those games as well. And it all came down to the last game where I believe they needed like 30 points in order to qualify. And unfortunately, the last game, Mongo did get eliminated by a chainsaw, which wasn't really his fault. There was a wooden box behind them, a bit of miscommunication, it seems like, a bit of late rotates between the trio, and he ended up dying, and then Marius and Savage died in the moving zones, unable to qualify, and they ended up placing, I believe, like 220th, 230th over on the leaderboard. So not too horrible, but obviously a trio of this caliber should be expecting to qualify every single time if you compare it to some of the other trios that are playing these tournaments as well. Another trio that didn't fully get up to expectations was Queasy, Venom, and Pixie, who didn't qualify this week as well. Last week in the finals, they also didn't end up making money overall, and now they didn't qualify, which is an interesting thing because it is one of the trios you're expecting to be the best trio in EU. Obviously, in the off-season, it doesn't actually mean too much. They're probably not as prepped as they would be when we go into an FNCS in the future, but it is interesting to see how this team is looking overall compared to some of the other trios in EU. Obviously, this format is a little bit more frag heavy. We're seeing some of the fragging trios do super well. Maybe this is a better trio for a set lobby type of format. I do wonder though if this is a sign for them to maybe start trying out different options. If there's a key unique issue that they have overall within the trio, we don't know other than they, but it is interesting to note. Another trio who didn't end up making it through was Teeny, Chicho, and Wolvax, who was a new trio that tried out this week. Now Wolvax, a very controversial player. A lot of people are convinced this player is cheating. Ended up playing Eval Cup with Veno this week, won a game, made money, ended up winning the duo Cash Cup with Vico this week as well, so he's definitely hot off the press, and a lot of people are looking at him for potential trio options, and he got that opportunity playing with two of the best Balkan players, Teeny and Chicho, this week, but they didn't end up making it out of the opens, which is interesting for a very frag heavy trio, like I said. Now this is the second week in a row that Teeny and Chicho were not able to make it out of opens, which is interesting because they're a duo that does super well, but in trios it seems like they are struggling. So I wonder what is going on and what they need to fill that spot out of that third last players. Speaking of that third last player, Trulex, who is one of the players that obviously Chicho split with, and I thought they were going to play trios together, also didn't make it out of opens when he played with iDrop and Della, also new tryout. So does this mean that maybe Trulex finally gets a call up back into his old teammates, his old trio? Is that IGL what they need instead of more fragging power? Well, that remains to be seen. And the last trio I want to talk about was Thomas HD, Tayson, and Kiro, which is a new tryout trio. Thomas HD and Tayson are back together, the old duo who ended up having some issues in this tournament and not qualifying, but it is a very interesting combination of players. It's good that Tayson is getting some decent options still as a trio. I know a lot of people were worried about what his options were. We had Veno saying that he asked a bunch of tier 1s around EU and none of them wanted to play with him, so him being able to play with Thomas and Kiro, which, you know, two players that know each other very well, is interesting, but not being able to qualify, we can't really extrapolate too much for it, but it is more interesting to note. Now, other than that, the finals did end up being played out, like I said, even with the issues of 40 to 50% of teams actively not being able to play out the games, and the top 5 was as follows. First place, we had Vico, Chap, and Flixie with 455 points in total. Second, we had Ping, Wox, and Malabuka, which is very interesting because Ping and Wox obviously had a lot of success in the past year for duos, but ended up not wanting to play trios together, it seems like. But now they're playing together and they play with Malabuka, who's obviously looking for teammates, and they did super well. They had insane games when it comes to eliminations. Let me run up through the match history. They got a First place with 13 eliminations, a 20 kill win, an 11 kill 6, an 18 kill second, and 11 kill second in the last 6 games overall, which is insane consistency. Compare that to Vico and Flixie's games, very similar, but a lot more placement heavy for those guys in comparison. In third place, we had Sky, Refscott, and Scroll. For Tyx, Yasin, and Saud in fourth, and then Swizzy, Murstache, and Vanya in fifth with 401 points in total. Now, we can't really extrapolate too much from what this means for these trios, but it does seem like when we were watching this tournament live on my Twitch channel, seemed like it was pretty much the battle of Vico, Chap, and Flixie versus Swizzy, Murstache, and Vanya. Same as last week, they were both putting up numbers. One won a game, the other won a game. They went back and forth with Pingwalks and Malibuke in there. Sometimes in the same game, of course, getting second places. So it does seem like right now in this trio format, we do potentially have a 3-horse race when it comes to fragging powerhouses in EU, which makes it super, super exciting. Now, the biggest question, of course, is how will these trios end up doing when it comes to set lobbies? Obviously, very, very talented players, a lot of experience. Dropping a 20 bomb in a set lobby or a grand finals lobby isn't as likely compared to some of these open lobbies where you have 198 trios and a lot of bad trios like BloodX who qualify. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe. Also, we do viewing parties every single day of these tournaments. If you want to hang out, check it out, discuss, twitch.tv/CoachBoop. I'll see you guys in the next one.